It's the Marty Show. Hello and welcome to the Marty Show. I'm your host, Kenny. This time we're going to have a look at a very interesting book, Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. A great book about horror novels from the 70s and 80s, mainly about the cover art. And books back then had very, very interesting covers. That was probably the best way to get them to sell copies because they had to be catchy looking. They had to catch your interest. In many cases, these books weren't all that good. They were pretty derivative. As you can see here, the title is embossed, a bit like the paperbacks from back then. They often had embossed covers. I'll show you an example. So this is Clive Barker's Cabal. We can't really see all that well, but the cover is embossed. If we look inside, we might. No, we don't. It's got nice art inside, though. And this one's a good book. In any case, let's have a more thorough look at the book. We've got a very cool illustration here right from the start. I'm not sure which book this is from, but it's a bit like The Invisible Man. And as you can see here, Paperbacks from Hell, The Twisted History of 70s and 80s Horror Fiction by Grady Hendrix with Will Errickson. I follow his, he's got a blog, which I recommend, which is Too Much Horror Fiction, horror paperbacks of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's a little bit similar to the book we have at hand now. I recommend it. In any case, we're going to have a look at the chapters. We've got some nice artwork right there. I think it looks a little bit like Firestarter, Stephen King's Firestarter. Very nice. But let's have a look at the list of chapters. The first one is about the satanic panic type of books that were very popular in the 70s thanks to the success of The Exorcist and The Omen. And there were quite a lot of movies like that came out. Then we have Creepy Kids, When Animals Attack, Real Estate Nightmares, Amityville type books. Scary haunted houses. Weird Science. You can imagine what that's about. And then we've got Gothic and Romantic, which is more into like the Anne Rice type of books. Vampire stories, mainly. Then we have Inhumanoids, basically mutants, monsters, things like that. And lastly, we've got splatterpunks, serial killers, and super creeps. That's the more hardcore variety from the end of the 80s and early 90s. The Little People. What a book cover. That's very impressive. I'm not sure the book is impressive, but this cover is something. We've got these Nazi elves. Hail Satan, Chapter 1. Here we've got very famous books. No need to introduce Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. The other is a little more obscure, but it's also in the same genre. And here the book introduces us to the satanic panic trend we've got some lesser known ones here. The Dowry, To the Devil a Daughter. There's a movie of that with Christopher Lee. Falling Angel, nice illustration right here. No idea if that's a good book or not. I might say that a lot here because I haven't read most of them. What I'm more interested in is the artwork. You see, here we've got H.P. Lovecraft. I've read those. The illustrations illustrate whatever you can't really imagine while reading. Here we have some, the eyes, that creeped me out when I was a kid for some reason. There's a very cheesy movie called Kathy's Curse. Somehow that was filmed in Montreal, and the cover of that movie just creeped me out. It was similar to that, the cover art of the VHS cassette. The Sentinel, there's a movie of that, it's good. James Herbert, Shrine. I actually have that book, but I haven't read it, so I can't really comment on it. Some more interesting art. I love the one on top over there. I don't know if you can see, there's a priest and that. The Keep. I've read that. That's very good. There is a movie, film version, directed by Michael Mann. Let's move on to creepy kids. Some people find kids cute, some people find them annoying, and some people find them scary. So that's probably why there's a whole slew of creepy kids books. The Omen, maybe the most famous one. Although I would include that in the Satanic Panic section as well. And you've got 5 books. Omen 2, The Final Conflict, Armageddon 2000, and The Abomination. I haven't read any of these, but they've got cool titles. I would read them. Crib. Embryo. So for some reason on this page we have unborn or yet to be born babies. And the titles just are, there's something. Premature. The Reaping. Here's another one, Spawn by Sean Hudson. He wrote Slugs. I haven't read anything by him, but I heard his stuff is pretty hardcore. That would enter the splatterpunk category. But Slugs is, well, at least the movie is pretty disgusting, but also hilarious. From the director of Pieces, a very funny movie. And speaking of splatterpunk, we have Edward Lee here. He's also famous for writing in that genre. And this is a book from the early 2000s. There's terrible CG art on the cover. I really don't like it. But the book itself is pretty fun. And here we have more scary children books. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. Again, there's a movie version of that with Jodie Foster and Martin Sheen. Mama's Little Girl. She's got a hammer. Better watch out. Let's go play at the Adams, a novel of lingering horror. And here we enter teenage horror. Creepy teens. In my book, they're way creepier than kids. Chet Day. Hello. Elizabeth. Hellhound. There's also a movie of that one. A French movie called Baxter. It's worth seeking out, although I wouldn't really say it's a horror movie. I don't know if you can find it, but if you can, yeah, it's worth watching. The whole movie is from the perspective of the dog. Interesting. When Animals Attack. Of course, the most famous book, the most notorious book is Jaws by Peter Benchley. I haven't read it, but I'm sure all of you have seen the movie, and if you haven't, you should watch it now. Stop whatever you're doing and watch it. The Rats, James Herbert again. That's his most famous book, and there's a very terrible movie based on this book with dogs dressed as rats. They're supposed to be giant rats. And more dog horror. Dog kill. He's gonna bite your balls. If you have balls. And the cats. And here's I guess it's a bat. Is it a bat or a rabbit? Or a very, very pissed off squirrel. The Folly. And we've got the farm over there on top. A scary pig. Pigs are scary. Orca. Slime. It's like evil snot. I would read it. I'm not sure if it's fun or interesting, but at least the cover grabs you. Crabs, the human sacrifice. You've got them in your pants. Maggot slugs. Well, that's what I told you about earlier, right here. Disgusting cover. Eat them alive. Ants. Next we have Real Estate Nightmares. I live in one. Anyway, haunted houses, scary mansions, burnt offerings. That's a good one, a famous one. The movie's pretty good too. It's got Oliver Reed in it, one of my favorite actors ever. Known as a hellraiser. He was always drunk. But he was still a good actor. A functional drunk, at least for a large part of his career. Hell House, that's another famous one. The Architecture of Fear. Amityville, that's, the first movie's okay. The second one is fun, from what I recall. And then it's a shit fest for most of, it's a crap fest for most of the other movies. Interestingly, Amityville is a name that you can't copyright because that's the actual name of a place. So you could do Amityville YouTube videos if you wanted to. 666, good book title. Again, no idea if it's any good, but it's from the writer of the first Amityville novel. Night Train. Again, no idea if that's any good. The cover is great though. I like the scary face in the window. Here we have kind of urban looking horror in trains and subway stations and so on. Urban horror. Nice cover art here too. The Face That Must Die by Ramsey Campbell, very famous author. Not as well known as Stephen King or Clive Barker, but pretty well known. Next, we have Weird Science, Chapter 5. Think about Frankenstein and so on. We've got the Tulpa right here on top. If you've seen season 3 of Twin Peaks, you are probably familiar with this word. I guess a bit unlikely, but maybe David Lynch read this book. And we've got The Mall, Black Magic by Whitley Strieber, a guy who was supposedly abducted by aliens, and that made him write a whole bunch of true fiction books, although fiction is probably closer than the true part, if you know what I mean. And I guess you do, as Joe Bob would say. little brother, The Hacked. So here we have technology horror, but very, very early computer technology. It's probably a riot to read. Bugs. I'd love to read those. Must be fun. And right here on top, we've got a minor classic, at least in my book. I don't know if you have ever heard of the movie Pin. This is the book, but the movie is a hidden gem. Was made in 1988, Canadian film, about an anatomy mannequin that kills. Well, whether it kills or not, it's something you have to figure out while watching the movie or probably reading the book. I'm not sure if the book is more literal about it. In the movie, you might think the guy is crazy. The gothic and romantic. Flowers in the Attic, a classic of that genre. I like the girl in the attic right there. Although her head is way bigger than the window somehow. Doesn't really fit. Interview with the Vampire, that's another classic book. I remember seeing the movie and then reading the book, and I enjoyed both of them. Now there's a TV series. The first season came out not too long ago. I haven't watched it, but I might. Yeah, Anne Rice, especially the first few books, are very good in that series. Then we've got more vampire stuff. Dracula in Love. Let's skip that. Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. I wonder who that guy is. Oh, yeah. Just kidding, I know who that is. Yeah. He wrote a TV series that we shouldn't name. Light Girls. My Blood Alone. There are some interesting titles, but then again, I'm sure the titles and the cover art are more interesting than the books. Here's some pretty poor cover art, though. Doesn't really look like a shark. It looks pretty sad. Doesn't really make you feel like reading it, right? And here we've got Michael McDowell. He wrote, among other things, Beetlejuice, and he's pretty well known for these two things: The Amulet and the Blackwater book series. I haven't read any of these, but that's something that I'd like to do. I've heard very good things about these. If you like gothic, southern gothic horror, should be worth a read, I think. And here we've got Halloween themed horror. Ray Bradbury, one of my favorite writers ever. And more. I think this book right here was re-edited through the Paperbacks From Hell series. They've re-released some of these books recently, and you can actually buy them now. Again, no idea if that's worth a read, but if they re-edited them, they must be interesting, or there must be something of interest in them. I'd definitely pick it up, but it's a bit expensive though. It's over $20 here in Canada if you want to buy these. Inhumanoids, Evil Eye. Yeah, that's a cool cover. I love it. And some Weird Tiger. Oh, and if you look at the bottom, we have The Djinn by Graham Masterton, who wrote The Manitou. I don't know if you've ever heard of The Manitou, but the movie itself is, the movie adaptation, sorry, is, it's a riot. I highly recommend watching it, especially if you like movies that are so bad it's good. It's about this lady who has a pimple growing on her back, and she finds out that it's the reincarnation of an evil shaman slash Manitou. And the pimple grows and grows, and the Manitou comes out of it. Basically, he comes out, grows out of the lady, and then she fights him off with the help of a very drunk Tony Curtis. And the Manitou's like 3 feet tall, and he's got lasers coming out of his fingers. It's pretty hilarious. I highly recommend it. Again, if you like So Bad It's Good movies. In fact, if we turn the page, you're going to see that the Manitou is right here on top. So I'm sure the book version is better than the movie. But as I said, the movie is So Bad It's Good. I really recommend it. And here we've got The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. I'm not sure if I recommend this one, but it's a very good book. On the other hand, it's really graphic and disturbing. It's more like a true crime novel rather than horror, but the violence in this book is unbearable in some parts, and I recommend it, but only if you have a strong stomach for this kind of thing. And Care and Comfort by Dan Simmons. Dan Simmons is one of my favorite writers ever. I've read most of his work, and Care and Comfort is his second book. He started off as a horror writer. His first book is Song of Kali, a very good one too. Care and Comfort is excellent. But then he became famous for Hyperion, a science fiction novel. Hyperion is a must-read in my book. And he also wrote The Terror, which is more of a historical fiction book. There's a TV series on Amazon of that. And then we enter the Splatterpunks, the last chapter, serial killers, etc. The Kill Riff by David J. Scow. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He wrote the film adaptation of The Crow. Clive Barker, The Books of Blood. The cover is terrible, but of course it's a classic. Here we have Joe R. Lansdale's The Drive-In. It's very interesting. It's crazy. It's more like a gonzo horror story. I highly recommend another one of his books called Night Runners. For some reason, they don't show the cover in this book here, but The Night Runners is a good one if you're interested in his horror works. He's more well known for his crime fiction novels now. And here we've got some covers that wouldn't be released nowadays. You wouldn't find that at the local supermarket. I think it's, wow, that's pretty shocking stuff here. Then again, I'm pretty sure the books themselves are not all that interesting. And here we have Black Christmas. It probably has nothing to do with the movie of the same name, because the movie came out in 1974 and this book came out in 1983. But the movie is very good. It's another classic. From the same director as A Christmas Story. And here we have Christopher Pike. He's also famous for writing young adult horror stories, a bit like R.L. Stine right here. And we've reached the end of the book, and we have the most gruesome illustration so far here. Apparently that was cropped when the book was published. So you probably just saw the pig with a bloody nose, but you didn't see the corpse right here. But here we have the whole image. And we're done. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix, the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror fiction. I highly recommend it. It's very good. Sorry about the sunlight here. By the way, I don't have all that many paperbacks from that era. Here's one, and it's in pretty sorry shape. Stranglehold by Jack Ketchum. A little bit similar to the one we talked about a bit earlier, The Girl Next Door. It's also really heavy stuff. I can't really recommend it, although Stephen King does. It's very disturbing material. This time it's about domestic violence. And if you're not okay with scenes of extreme violence toward other family members, I don't recommend reading this. It's heavy stuff. It's disturbing, but it's meant to be. If you're interested in seeking out some horror paperbacks, have a look online, and if you're lucky, you might find some in secondhand stores. Well, bye for now. Thanks for watching.